Blige did a interview with Earn Your Leisure, and it was interesting. I seen this content creator. She really broke down some of the guests that they brought on during the show who perpetuated narratives that really kind of like deceived a lot of people. Narratives such as like the Forex and all the trading and the real estate advice, and how so many of the people who came onto their show and gave their listeners advice about, Forex or whatever, and real estate advice were actually, people who were scammers, and the men knew about it. And I think that one of the things that I will say, just even to that, is like attention is so addicting. And like whenever you find yourself in this rat race, I call them the consistency. I call them the consistency advocates. That's what I call them, because we're just not wired that way. And when you find yourself in this space where you're like, I got to be consistent. Yes, you have to be consistent, and you should be consistent, right? But like, if you find yourself in a space where you're teetering the fence in regards to like morale and like, you know what I mean, just to have viewers or just to be consistent in that realm, then you need to take a step back. So we're going to be talking about in this podcast episode, that's what this episode is about. We're going to be talking about narratives that we need to just kind of destruct at this point. And we're going to be talking about what it means to be successful and defining that, within the Black community. But my point was with this Mary J. Blige question that was asked to her about a divorce that happened years ago with someone who Mary admittedly said that she married, she didn't love herself. She was struggling with self-love and so forth. So this wasn't the best candidate for her. This was someone who, she married at this time in her life and so forth. And it's not really gossip. It's not really to really talk about Mary or put her down. I think as a woman, every woman has made poor relational choices based on what we knew at the time, based on the self-love, the care, the understanding of ourselves, and all those things that we possess within ourselves at the time. So this isn't to really talk about Mary, but I didn't really like the way this question was worded. It's so funny. I'm never really too impressed with a lot of podcasters today because, and I say this all the time, but because of the low barriers to entry, anybody can do it. You know what I mean? And we're going to be talking about that too in today's episode, but anybody can do it. And so I don't really get too much out of podcasts today because you have people who don't really know what it's like to interview. You have people who don't really have an innate curiosity for other people. You just have people who want to put themselves on the podium. I tell you guys this all the time. Like when you get in front of a microphone, you feel powerful, right? Nobody ever asked you what you think. You know what I mean? So like now you can put this microphone in your face. You feel very powerful. You feel like you have something to say and that people need to listen to what you got to say, even if you sound ridiculous. You know what I mean? And so the way this question was positioned, it was essentially somewhere along the lines, and I'm going to paraphrase, what would you do differently to protect your assets from that divorce and the alimony that you had to pay? This question is kind of like one of those bait and switch questions because it's like it's a direct funnel to the answer that you want the person to say. Right. And inevitably, Mary said, I would have done a better job of protecting my assets. I would have been more mindful of, my financial situation, my financial, my business and my financial acumen. Right. Like I wouldn't have left that to other people. And now I will never leave it again to other people. Right. And so it's just like, I think one of the things I just really dislike about a lot of these podcasts, and not really to put down Earn Your Leisure, because I think that they also have, with the bad, there's some good, they do have some insight on there. I'm not going to just completely cancel them, right? And it really doesn't matter what I think anyway. But just overall, like I really hate when people pose questions like that. And so I think what you have today is not really conversations that can spark insight, but conversations that feed into these very negative ideologies that are already permeating the spaces, right? You already hear people talking about, especially people who get a little bit of money, right? Little people who start getting a little bit of money, like, yo, you got to get a prenup. Everybody's saying that. So it's like, I just didn't really like the way they worded that because I didn't feel like that was something that was insightful. I didn't feel like that was any, you know what I mean? That was such a classic bait and switch let me word this, let me funnel this and really get you to say exactly what it is that we want you to say, which is have a prenup, validate me, right? Validate other listeners and viewers and other men who are getting this little, you know what I mean, this little money or whatever, and validate us in this space. You know what I mean? And then what you hear in the background after she said that answer, all these women clapping. This right here perpetuates division. And this is why we're not progressing. Guys, welcome back to the Renaissance Room podcast. And in today's episode, we're going to be talking about quite a few things, as you know from the intro, which was quite an extensive one. We are going to be addressing what it means to be prosperous and to be successful. I think now is definitely the time to really start to reevaluate what these definitions mean. I think, and I said this before, I wrote about this in my column, just how when it comes to the Black community, we've really kind of tapped into this space where we are at this point in time now where because of TikTok, because of the immersion and like the integration, we can very clearly identify the economic inequality, right? We can see how the other, people are living, right? We can look at our communities, we can sit in our spaces, and we can see how we don't have the same opportunities, right? I also say this all the time, proximity. Social media has created this false sense of proximity as well. So we have celebrities. And so the standard of living is this very narrow standard, and it's really funneled in imagery and aspiration, such as the Mercedes-Benz, right? Such as the G-Wagon, right? Remember the G? I really want to pull the stats. I didn't even pull the stats. I should have pulled the stats because I'm just thinking about it right now. But I should have pulled the stats. How many G-Wagons was purchased in like 2020? Purchased, leased, rented. You know what I mean? That they had like that was like a booming thing. That became the utmost standard. I think it really started with like the Jenners, and then we kind of seen it within the Black influencers who were really taking off at this time. Black influencers on social media and so forth. And so like the G-Wagon was really like a thing. Like every business owner, whether it was rented, whether it was just someone taking a picture, whether it was leased, whether some people were actually going out and buying them, the G-Wagon had become like the staple. Like that was the staple. Like if you have a business and you're doing well, you need a G-Wagon. Get the G-Wagon, let people know you are prosperous, right? And so now fast forward, you see a lot of women, I'm going to say women because I'm just noticing it from my own standpoint. Women are aspiring for this very European kind of like style lifestyle, which consists of the luxury high-rise apartment, right? This modern contemporary feel, this minimalistic kind of like approach to fashion, like the slick back buns, right? Like you just see this very narrow standard of what it means to be successful. And then I think for men, I'm not really too into men, so I can't really say, but I definitely think one of the hard markers would definitely be the 6-figure earnings, right? So it's like one thing I just kind of want to talk to Black people about is recognizing that there is economic inequality and recognizing that this may be something that may not change in your lifetime because this is a very long plight. And not only is it a long plight, we've lost a lot of people along the way. We are not all on the same bandwagon. We are not all fighting the same thing. I think in regards to Black liberation, Black equality, and all these other different things, we are not really on the same page because we're fighting for one, we use our voices to amplify those people who are considering themselves marginalized or maybe marginalized, right? So much of our ammunition goes to helping other people, right? We're fighting for women's rights in regards to patriarchy, things that do not concern us. Black men do not benefit from patriarchy. We don't benefit from patriarchy, okay? It does not affect us. It's not the same thing. I tell you guys this all the time, but like when it comes to the narrative, for example, boys will be boys, right? Within the white culture, there is a lot of exploitation that goes on within their women. I remember visiting the New York Sex Museum and really seeing the origins of porn, where it originated from. We can also see this in Greek mythology. That, degradation of women, that is something that is that's rooted heavily in Europeanism. And it may not be Europeanism. You can say it's German, whatever. I'm just keeping it very simple in terms of cultures. That's where it came from, right? It did not come from within the Black community. And so I think the problem is inevitably, when we're brought up and we're taught one way of living, one way of being, and we're not really introduced to any other ways of living and being outside of the standard European way of living and being, which is white supremacy, right? This is white supremacy. There's only one way, and so forth. This is where the danger comes in, because not only are you now robbed culturally, now you're esteeming to a certain lifestyle that was not meant for you, that is not cut out for you. And what I mean by that is that what we don't realize is the cultural ignorance. We have a lot of cultural ignorance that really just kind of runs rampant because we don't address it. And it's something that I think just with integration and a lack of education, a lack of enlightenment, that's kind of what it becomes, right? And what I mean by cultural ignorance is that we don't realize it, but in the Black community, we value materialism, right? Dr. Kunjumfu was just talking about this. I love his teachings. I just came into the knowledge of him, and so it's great. I look forward to working with my kids about some of his teachings and peer pressure and so forth. But he talks about this, right? And we know that this is true. In the Black community, we care about, from young adolescents, right? These very formative years. We care about the shoes we're wearing. We care about, what kind of backpack we're going to get. We care about how our hair is going to be done. You know what I mean? We have no desire to read the syllabus. We have no desire to go to our parents have no desire to go to the school, meet with the faculty, meet with the teachers, you know what I mean? Sit down, show up, and so forth. That's not our concern. Our concern is materialism. He talks about how, in terms of athleticism, how athletes are the ones who are esteemed in schools, how athletes are the one who, athletes are the one we praise. We see this even today, right? But the scholar, the teacher, the Black teacher, you don't get any of that recognition. And so we just have to realize that there's a cultural difference, and that imbalance really lies in recognizing that in certain communities, there are certain value systems, right? So I said this, and I think saying it out loud, it may be a little bit more curt. So I want to be mindful of how I say this, but within our community, we put a high priority on materialism. In the Western world, they put a high, in European cultures, they put a very high standard and priority on economic success and status, right? Economic wealth and opportunity. That's why sometimes when you enter into these rooms, sometimes the conversation is superficial. Sometimes it's just one of those things where you just kind of listen closely and realize how they communicate with one another. It's really all a matter of esteeming yourself to be smarter, esteeming yourself to be someone who's educated, throwing around these big words, things that you may not even understand, talking about your career, talking about your job. You know what I mean? It's all about status. It's all about economic gain and opportunity. And so what's happening is that because of our own cultural ignorance, not knowing that we were a people who are rooted in Christ, we are a people who are rooted in community. We are a community of people who are rooted in family, right? Black people are so loving, so kind, so generous. You know what I mean? That's our value. That's our culture, right? We are people who are helping. We are nurturers and so forth, right? We are the ones who are preaching peace, even in a nation that actively mistreats us. You know what I mean? And I don't say that to scoff. I say that to say that's just the nature of Black people. Black people really are very loving people, and so, we're the ones who are allying with those who are considering themselves marginalized and all these new movements, and even in the movements in the past, right? We were allying with white women to fight for their equality, you know what I mean? So they can go out, get jobs, and then make money and then go back home while we didn't have that same opportunity, So I just think that when we start looking at the cultural differences, we come up short. And so when you start taking on a lot of these European standards and you start to assimilate yourself with that, and you start to kind of fall in line with that and have these very lofty desires, not recognizing systemic barriers, you're going to have a lot of people who are discontented and unhappy. I believe that this is why our children are being abused. I believe this is why our children are being neglected. I believe this is why our children are being mistreated. Our children are not being raised. Our children are being raised by these very careless entertainers that we continuously put on a pedestal because we value entertainment, right? We value celebrityism. We value athletes and so forth. And this is why we have so much destruction. This is why we have so much chaos in the community. This is why we have so much disorder. You see what I'm saying? And until we really recognize that and sit with that, we'll never be a people who are happy. Our values are out of place. And until we recognize and say, hey, look, we're taking on values that are our own. This is not us. This is not what we stand for. This is not what we're about. I think too often, because there is a lack of education, right? And I don't mean education, institutionalized education. I mean independent study in regards to African American history, because we know that oftentimes, unless you're studying African American history, which even still in that sense, right, that's not being taught at the institution. So a lot of this is absolutely independent study. You can watch YouTube videos and so forth, but there's a lot to unpack. I mean, just imagine, it's literally so much that you have not been taught about you. That's crazy, right? That's a lot of information. That's a lot of learning. So because we're void of that, it's so easy for us to start to aspire for European standards and ways of living when we don't realize that that's never been our ways of living. We have to understand that, not from a racial standpoint and not from a hateful standpoint, but we have to understand that when it comes to European ideals of success, they have these things. They have these nice things, these big houses, because they cheated people out of opportunity. They redline communities. They push people out. They've gypped people. They've robbed people. They've wronged people. They've killed people. They've committed genocides. They've committed massacres and so forth, and even still continuously, right? You have to realize that what you're coveting is something that is so ugly in the inside. It's like desiring a present with a very pretty bow and not realizing what's on the inside. It's a dead possum in there, and it's reeking and it smells, but you want it because it's beautiful and it's big. This is big house and it's all these different things. And that's not to say that Black people can't have nice things. But when we start looking at job opportunities, when we start looking at, pay salaries and we start looking at compensation, and we start looking at systemic equality, and we start really paying attention to all the ways in which we are deprived, all the ways in which we are discriminated against in the job market and so forth, we have to realize that these are not our standard ways of living, and they never have been. But we are a people who have become so covetous. We have become so envious. We have become so just really caught up in imagery. And we don't realize that what we're striving for is not our way of living. That was never our way of living. And it's not to say that we should be proud to have less. We have to understand that less has always been more. You know what I mean? You hear a lot of Europeans adopting this same ideology. Less is more. They're adopting your customs. You see what I'm saying? But when you don't know what the value system is, what the value system has been, you'll easily fall prey into this. It breaks my heart to see so many young Black men and young Black women not getting married, not, being in community with one another, especially as young adults and so forth, feeling like I met a guy who told me he was like, I don't have a house. I'm like, what do you mean you don't have a house? We're 25. Why can't we just get an apartment? You know what I mean? And be married and be happy and be cheerful. What we could afford together at this point in time. Like, you know what I mean? I'm like, wow, like this is just crazy. And hey, God's plan. But my overall point is that we don't realize that's not our standard way of living. That's not our standard way of being. And so when you don't know the cultural ignorance, when you don't realize how welfare systems and things like having to take care of parents, right? You have the mothers who are unwed, right? You have the children who are fatherless, and you have the older brothers who have to become all these different things for the kids, for the family, and so forth. It's like we don't really take into consideration a lot of the emotional baggage that falls on to us and it carries over and from generation to generation. We don't have the favor of God, when we don't have the knowledge of Christ, the pain, the grievances, the suffering, the trauma that we don't really have the strength to overcome, because of our children's folly, because of our own lack of wisdom and so forth, and so it's like it just becomes a very perpetuating cycle, which starts to feel like a generational curse because we don't have wisdom. We don't have an understanding of who we are. We don't have wisdom of Christ. We don't have our Creator. You know what I mean? We don't have His favor. We don't have His blessings in our lives. The way we live in our lives is not in alignment with what it is that He's commanding us to do. It's not in alignment with what it is that He is requiring of us. We're not loving towards one another. We're very hateful towards one another. That's why I tell you guys all the time, I'd be so over these movements with all these Black women this, Black women so. That's not the way it is in real life. And I think we're too busy at this point. Everything has become so performative. Check out that podcast episode I did. Since when did we all become performers, right? And entertainers. Everything has become so performative. Blackness is performative. You see it all the time. When you see the cultural ignorance, right? You see these kids of other ethnicities come online and they try to, showcase what it means to be Black. And they're always doing something super ghetto or super just, outlandish, right? And it's a sad thing. And so we have to really get clear on what it means to be a Black person. We have to get really clear on what it is that makes life prosperous, what it is that makes life worth living to us. We have to get back in touch with our values. That's our ancestral root, right? Too often, and this is the danger too, right? So whenever you allow someone to kind of teach you in a certain extent, you will be subjected to their psychologies, their ideologies, their philosophies, right? And if someone says, well, this is bad or this is wrong based on their own opinion, their own cultural immersion, their own cultural ignorance and so forth, then you start to believe that it is wrong, even if it ain't wrong. You know what I mean? It's just different. You see what I'm saying? And so it's like you have a lot of people wanting to change themselves. A lot of people, Black people especially, that's what I'm talking about, struggling with things like self-hate, struggling to feel like they can do anything, be anything, right? And really seeking to aspire to whiteness, not being proud of who they are. You know what I mean? Not recognizing that they can do anything. It's not understanding the history and how many times we've broken records. You can even see this today. We're going to talk about sports, right? Athletes. Most athletes, like the leading athletes, are Black men. You know what I mean? But it's unfortunate because this is what's being highlighted. It's the rappers and the entertainers. And so you're not really seeing the doctors. You're not seeing the engineers. You're not, you know what I mean? And then there's homosexuality, which plays a big role in how that's permeating a lot of spaces, So there's a lot to unpack here. I just wanted to get on here and make this podcast episode to really just raise awareness for the adults that are listening. Seek to find a new standard. Find a new standard for your ways of life. Know that it's possible, but understand where your values lie. You know what I mean? Figure out what it means to have a life of prosperity for you and to you. Seek to define what Blackness is for you. What does Black prosperity look like for you? Because striving for European standards is not the answer. That's not the answer, because everyone may not be a millionaire. You could very much start your own business and be making $50,000 a year. That's a lot of money. You know what I mean? To be, something kind of like a mom and pop, or to be something like a small business owner. That's a lot of money. And if you can earn more than that, that's great. But I just think that right now we have to really dial it back, because we have become covetous, and we have become a people who are just so immersed in materialism that we're foregoing values, and it's leading us right to destruction. Is leading us absolutely right to destruction. We're literally creating lives of misery. You know what I mean? You were created to be in community. You were created to love. You were created to serve, right? That's God. If God is in you, God has a servant heart. That's what God does. And so when you adopt these narratives, about, you need to cut people off to be successful. You know what I mean? All of these kind of like Western culture, right? Which really this isn't surprising, being that, again, this nation was founded on the piggybacking, the backbiting, the betrayals. You know what I'm saying? So if you're not willing to fall in line with that, and if you make the conscious decision, then hey, that's on you. But if you're not willing to fall in line with that to achieve this American idea of prosperity that's very narrow and very linear, then you need to really reassess, what are my values? What choices do I need to make today in my relationships, in my health, in my spirituality, in my life, in my business and so forth, my education, whatever the case may be? What choices do I need to start making today? What do I need to learn today to create a life of happiness for me? And when we really start to crunch the numbers, I tell you guys this all the time. If you get married, right, and you're at 40K and he's at 40K, you guys are like 80K. Depending on where you live, that's a lot of money. And I think I talked about this in a prior episode, but like maturing You know what I mean? Maturing and start realizing that life is not necessarily a matter of like, oh, you can't live out your dreams or you can't do whatever you want to do. That's not what I'm saying. But maturing is coming to a point in realization in your life where you have to be practical. You need to be practical with your finances. You need to be practical with reality, right? Be balanced, be of a sound mind, right? Does that make sense for you to go and take your 40K salary and go live in New York City? Does that make sense? You know what I mean? Does that make sense to go? And unless you have certain opportunities and things set up, that doesn't make any sense. And don't get me wrong, I'm not here for you going to live your dreams. You do what you want to do with your life. That's fine. But I'm just saying, we paint these narratives for people, for young adults, and for Black Americans that, oh, you need to go and live in these bigger cities to become somebody. That's silly. That doesn't make any sense. Why would you do that? You see what I'm saying? And I'm never here to kill your dreams. You do what you want to do. But here's the thing, be practical. Do you have that kind of work ethic? Do you have the business set up? Do you have a plan? Because if not, you're going to spend a lot of time wasting time and money. And that's the one thing you can't get back. There's nothing wrong with pursuing your dreams, but I know one thing for sure. If you can't make something with the resources that God has given you, there ain't nowhere you're going to be able to go in this world that's going to give you something better than what's already inside of you. Because what's in you is enough. God is in you. That's more than enough. So if you haven't made nothing shake, rattle and roll with what it is that God has given you, if he is the creator, the end all be all within you, that almighty power that resides within you. If you haven't picked up the tools and started carving the clay and so forth with the resources he has given you today, you move into another country, another state, another city is not going to change anything. And I think this is also the problem, right? So it's like, we just have to stop believing everything follow God. That's what I'm saying. Follow God. Don't believe the lies of, oh, you need to move here for a better opportunity. You know, don't believe the lies of, oh, you need to do this you need to follow God. You need to find your purpose. Listen, God says, seek his kingdom, and all these things will be added unto you. So you got to find God. You have to find God. You have to put God first. And another point I want to touch on too, wrapping up this podcast episode, because I know I referenced the podcast, with Mary J. Blige. Understand that the narratives that are going around today are of a reprobate mind. God tells us every day you need to be meditating on your word because you need to be renewing your mind. If you are not conscious, if you are not conscientious about the things that you listen to, do you know that you will be a byproduct of misery, of bitterness? The seeds that are being sown into the ear gates and the floodgates of people that are just the media is really flooded with just a lot of negative messages about love, about family, about everything. So if you are not mindful, you will easily be turned over to the reprobate mind. You know how many people are insane right now? I woke up this morning, I praised the Lord. I said, God, I thank you for my sane mind. I thank you for peace and prosperity. You know, I almost lost my mind trying to pursue a life that I thought I wanted. Pursue a life that I thought I needed. You know, I almost lost my mind. I was making some crazy decisions. Girl, the devil had his hands right on me. I didn't even know it. By the grace of God, I'm here though. And I can share this with you all. What you're pursuing is smoke and mirrors, babe. It's smoke and mirrors. And furthermore, understand that we all make our choices. And this is what I was telling my sister this today. I said, Black people, we have to understand that we do have control over how this thing can go. I think that it's unfortunate that we are the only people who believe and are taught that we don't have a say-so over our destinies, over our futures. I've read African scholars. I've read African American literature. And they talk about how, Assata Shakur, for example, talked about how Black people are the only people who don't have a say over their futures and how things go. I would have to disagree. And I think that it's so unfortunate because sometimes we have scholars, and because they're so far and few between, because most of us want to be in the entertainment industry, right? We have the strippers, we have the athletes and so forth. And this is not to shame athletes. This is not to shame influencers in modern culture, right? That's completely fine. I'm not here to shame that. I'm just saying that this is typically the standard. But because we have these type of narratives that go around, this really puts children in a box, puts the youth in a box, puts so many of us in a box where we feel like we have no say over how this thing goes. So many of us are really stuck in a very vicious cycle of victimization. So many of us are stuck in a cycle where we just feel like we're helpless. We're in despair. That's where all this anger comes from. That's where all this frustration comes from. God is in control of your life. No, nobody, they not control. You know how many times I've lost jobs due to discrimination? I can't tell. Literally, if I could count, if I knew any better, girl, I would be racking up a couple 100,000 just based on the times I have been wrongfully let go and wrongfully terminated. It's crazy. But God is so good. You have to be resilient in life. These are the values that we need to be instilling in our children, not these narratives that tell them, oh, you don't have a say, capitalism. No. God is the end all be all. God is the first, the last, the middle, and the beginning. If he did it for me, he'll do it for you. But you're going to have to submit. You're going to have to come unto him. You're going to have to be chastened. You're going to have to be pruned. You're going to have to be corrected. But it's a way better life than anything that you're striving for. And the results are guaranteed. God's promises are surely they're going to come to pass. His promises are yes and amen. God is not a man that shall lie. He's not finicky like other people. And everything that God tells you is for your good. That's what a good father does. Your dad tells you to be home at a certain time. It's not because he wants to control you. It's because he knows what goes on at a certain time at night. You see what I'm saying? Your father tells you you're waking up at a certain time, you're going to practice. You know why? Because he knows what happens when you wake up and you do whatever you want and you lounge around the house till about 12 o'clock, 8 o'clock, and so forth. And the whole day is going by. And this is a very bad habit that will lead to laziness, that will lead to poverty, right? This idleness, this idle spirit. Faith without works is dead. So understand that when it comes to God and receiving the instruction from God, it's not a matter of, God wants to control you. This is religion. That's not the case. Nobody said you can't go to school because whatever. That's religion. That's religion. And maybe this is religion. Call it what you will. But your way is not working. And I can say that just from my own personal experience. My ways wasn't working. All that I was doing was not working. Out here following this spiritual tip, thinking everybody's good. I'm putting out good. Everybody else going to be good to me. Putting out this tip that, I can see, I can feel spirits. I can feel energy. Girl, I almost had myself bound up, thinking I knew something. Girl, if it weren't for the grace of God, who knows where I would be? Thinking I'm out here hustling, trying to pursue something. Now, I wasn't into nothing crazy, but just seeing how I was moving. So hasty, so quick, so fast, girl, not even present for the people in my life at the time. Ended up losing the people in my life. Girl, I was so miserable. I was so hurt. I was so lost. Felt like, girl, I lost myself. Completely lost myself trying to do things in my own way. By the grace of God, he restored me, but it wasn't until I submitted, until I sat down, bowed on my knees and said, I can't do this. I don't know what I'm doing. Please save me. Redeem me. Okay? I repent. So call it what you will, but this way of living, this way of thinking, these aspirations ain't working. Because guess what? I'm here with the kids. I'm seeing it today. Our children are depressed. Our children are deprived. Our children are being neglected because we got mothers, we got parents who are working to provide children with the things that don't really matter at the end of the day. This does not matter at the end of the day. I was talking to my sister about this. We don't have to be spending all this money on our kids. We don't have to be taking them on trips to Turks and Caicos. What is all of that? Take them to the park. Take them to the park after school. Take them to a park they haven't seen before. Take them to a bookstore. Half price books. Let them pick out $5 books. That's $15. Take them to go get some ice cream. That's it. You see what I'm saying? We have to understand that we are a people whose values are built on community, are built on love, are built on servitude, are built on strong foundational relationships with Christ, with God, our creator. We have to understand that this is not what this is about. We got it all twisted. And when you don't know, it's easy for you to try to adopt somebody else's ways, especially in a world where they tell you that your ways is wrong. Your skin color is wrong. So it's important. It all really ties in. And it's time for us to really tap in and understand that. It's crazy out here, and understand that negativity, everybody has a negativity bias. That's why we feed into certain things. And so it's like, you're going to have some people who feed into certain narratives, and that goes within any subject. And so when you hear people talking about, prenups and all this, and you really sit and think about it, understand that there are a lot of wolves in sheep's clothing. Not everybody who says God, is from God or of God. So a lot of these people, to me, who preach these things about prenuptial agreements and all these different things about marriage, understand these people they're not God's children. They don't have God's heart. Right? They're not even or anointed to even be speaking to you about marriage. They probably don't even got no peace when they own these podcasts and they're saying all these different things, probably being tormented in their spirit at night. That's what half of them come on these podcasts. They're drinking. They got to have a little drink with them to ease that anxiety, to ease that conviction, because they know they dead wrong for spewing hate, negativity, and misinformation. That God ain't nowhere up in that. They ain't got no grace up in that. They're not even qualified to even speak to you about any of that. Most of these guys are just young dudes who picked up on the internet at a certain time and trying to get a bag, a European ideal bag, custom, right? Talk about these value systems, striving for $1 million salaries on a podcast, a television show. I don't even think DL Hughley is even at that point. He's been doing this for a long time. Is that even a wage salary, within the broadcasting industry? I don't think it is, especially not on these very small platforms such as YouTube. Oprah Winfrey owns a network. You see what I'm saying? So really start to, and don't feel like you can't critique somebody because they're black and they're prosperous or whatever you feel like is prosperity. You see what I'm saying? It's this false sense of prosperity, and it's causing division, and it's spewing hate, and it's causing confusion within the community. If God has a servant heart and he calls us to be in covenant for the glory of his kingdom, why would you think God would have people out here talking about a prenuptial agreement? That doesn't even make sense. The whole purpose of marriage was rooted in Christ. No, First of all, polyamory was rooted in the Mormon church. So yeah, there's that. And then outside of that, people talk about African culture and listen, that's not what this whole marriage thing is about. Okay. If you don't want to be, first of all, not everybody's called to be married, because like I just said, that's not everybody's purpose in God's life. And furthermore, in this life, that's not God's purpose for everyone, although I think it is. But I realize not everybody want to be married. So with that being said, don't go to people who got these very negative, tainted views about marriage and so forth. Why are you even going to them? You'll never listen, I'm going to end with this. A lot of people are chasing happiness. Happiness is something that can only come from within. Happiness is a fleeting emotion. Joy is what you want. Joy is internal. It's unmovable. You can have joy in the midst of a storm. Happiness is fleeting. You can make a lot of choices today to have a happy life, right? You can make a lot of choices today to have happier circumstances, right? It's fleeting. You can buy a new car today and you will be happy today. You know what I mean? It's a very fleeting thing. It's something that one can grasp. You should not chase happiness. It's fleeting. It does not last. It's a drug. Okay? It's a quick high and it's gone. It's here for today. It's here for a moment, then it's gone. You wake up, you get the email, you got the good news, boom, you're happy. Get to work, you're not happy anymore. Get to work, having thoughts, start thinking about things, the enemy's on your mind, you're thinking negatively, boom, you're not happy. Frustrated, can't figure out a solution, you're not happy. Get home from work, your wife has cooked you something, right? You see your kids, you get another great email, boom, you're happy. You see what I'm saying? You go through, that's emotion. You go through that all throughout life. You see what I'm saying? But joy is internal. And so don't chase that. And I just want to end by saying, be conscious of what you listen to. Start making choices in your life that will lead you to a life of prosperity and success within your own definition. If you feel as though, being a good mom would make you someone who's successful, then you go do that. Don't listen to what other people got to say. If you feel like God has put a purpose in you and you feel like pursuing your purpose is what's going to make you happy, regardless of how much it makes, even if it makes good money, whatever the case may be, maybe it's not popular, who knows? You need to be asking God what it is that he has for you, because that's the only way you're going to really get to this level of peace that you're looking for, within money and all these different things. You're never gonna get it. You'll never have it, because it's with God. And then how can you have those things if you're not with him? He says, I am the tree, you are the vine. Without me, you can do nothing. Yeah. So you need to be in your Bible. You need to be in your Bible, because you need to be consecrated in some wisdom. And see, the good thing about God is he's so good, he left us with the Bible, right? We're not out here left to our own devices, such as podcasts and everything, searching for the answers. Start with the Bible. I'll end with that. And I hope you guys have a great day. And I hope you guys really take heed to what I'm saying. Define success for yourself. What does it mean to be Black? What does it mean to be prosperous? Peace.